A simple question from a curious child changed everything. When a young boy asked Donald Trump about God, he never imagined it would ignite a journey of faith, leadership, and self-discovery, one that would not only reshape his life but inspire an entire nation. It was a warm summer afternoon in Missouri, and the crowd gathered at the town hall event was buzzing with excitement. Donald Trump had arrived in town to speak, and for many, it was a chance to hear from the man who had once led the country, a figure of political controversy, but also a symbol of power. As the speeches went on and Trump spoke about policy and leadership, the mood in the room shifted from casual excitement to something more palpable. The audience hung on every word he said. Daniel Richardson, a 7-year-old boy, stood at the front, his small hands gripping the edges of a tattered Bible. He wasn't like the other kids running around, playing with toys or laughing in the crowd. His eyes were focused, intent on something much larger than the excitement of the event. His father, Jason, had died 6 months ago in a tragic car accident. It was sudden, unexpected, and left a hole in Daniel's heart that even time hadn't yet healed. His mother, Sarah, had been doing her best to comfort him, but the loss had raised more questions than answers. "Where did Daddy go?" Daniel had asked one night after another bad dream. "If God loves us, why did he take him away?" Sarah, who had always tried to keep her faith strong, struggled to explain in a way that would comfort her son. "God has a plan for everyone, sweetie," she would say, though she too was still grappling with the loss. But now, Daniel had a question he was determined to ask someone who might have an answer, someone who could give him the reassurance he desperately needed. His mother hadn't expected him to be so certain, but when she heard that Trump was coming to town, she saw it as an opportunity. "Maybe he'll know," Daniel said quietly one morning, looking up at his mother. "Maybe he can tell me if Daddy's really in heaven." Despite her doubts, Sarah agreed to take him. She would do anything to help him feel whole again, even if it meant asking an unexpected question at an event with thousands of people. As the microphone was passed around for the Q&A portion of the event, Daniel's heart raced. He wasn't just asking about politics or the economy. His question was about something deeper. The microphone reached their row and Sarah lifted her son onto her shoulders so he could be seen. With a trembling hand, Daniel took the mic, his voice shaking but determined as he asked, "Mr. Trump, do you believe in God?" The entire room fell silent. It was a question no one had expected. It wasn't about taxes or policy, not about borders or business. It was pure, innocent, and timeless. A question about faith. Trump, who had answered thousands of questions in his life, paused. His gaze shifted to the boy, and for a moment, something shifted in him as well. The crowd waited in suspense, and for the first time in a long time, the question seemed to matter more than any political issue. Trump cleared his throat, stepping closer to the microphone. "Daniel," he said, his voice warm, "that's a very important question. And I'll tell you the truth, I do believe in God. Always have, always will." The crowd murmured their approval, some clapping, but Trump wasn't finished. "When I was younger, my mother used to read the Bible to me," he continued, his eyes momentarily softening. "She told me that God is always with us, even when things get tough, even when we don't understand why things happen." Daniel stood quietly, absorbing the words, and then, almost too softly for the microphone to catch, asked, "Even when bad things happen?" Trump's voice lowered. "Especially then," he replied. "When bad things happen, it's a reminder that we have to trust God even more. We may not always understand why things happen, but He's there. He always is." Daniel's eyes filled with something between hope and sorrow. "You think my daddy's in heaven?" he asked, looking up at the man in front of him. Trump knelt down so they were eye to eye. "Did your daddy love you?" Trump asked gently. Daniel nodded, his small chin quivering. "More than anything," he whispered. "Then I believe your daddy is in heaven, watching over you." For the first time in months, Daniel's heart felt lighter. He didn't have all the answers, but something about Trump's words filled the emptiness he had been carrying. He wanted to believe that his daddy was truly out there, somewhere, watching over him. The event wrapped up, but the moment didn't end. As the crowd left, many were still talking about the exchange between the former president and the young boy. News outlets picked up the story, but the most unexpected reaction came from social media. The clip went viral. Some praised Trump for his heartfelt answer, while others criticized him for mixing politics with matters of faith. But what was clear was that this conversation had struck a chord with people across the country. Even in the midst of his busy schedule, Trump couldn't ignore the wave of support. He received countless letters from people who had been moved by his words, many sharing their own struggles with faith. Some had lost loved ones, some had questioned their beliefs, but they all felt that the moment with Daniel had somehow brought them hope. In private, Trump reflected on the moment as well. He thought back to his own childhood, to his mother's teachings about faith and resilience. He remembered the times when he had questioned his own beliefs, when things seemed dark, and how he had always returned to his faith for strength. It wasn't always easy, but it was something he could rely on. And then there was Daniel. He couldn't get the boy's face out of his mind, the sincerity in his voice, the hope in his eyes. It reminded him of the importance of holding on to faith, especially in difficult times. That evening, as Trump sat in his office reflecting, he made a decision. He would invite Daniel and his mother to visit him at Mar-a-Lago, a private gesture to let them know that their moment meant more to him than just a political soundbite. A few weeks later, Sarah and Daniel were flown to Mar-a-Lago for a private visit with Trump. It was nothing like the chaotic event in Missouri. This was a quiet, intimate conversation between the two of them and the man who had touched their lives in ways they never expected. When they arrived, Trump greeted them personally, and there was none of the usual fanfare. He invited them to sit and speak with him, without cameras or reporters. Just a simple, heart-to-heart conversation. Daniel, Trump began after they settled in, I want to thank you for that question. You reminded me of something important, faith. It's easy to forget about it when life gets busy, but you reminded me of what matters. Daniel looked up at him, his eyes wide with wonder. I didn't mean to make it a big deal, he said quietly, shifting in his seat. No, you did exactly what you were supposed to, Trump replied. You asked the question that a lot of people needed to hear. Sometimes we forget to ask the important questions. As the years passed, Daniel carried with him the lesson he had learned that day. His life wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, times when he missed his father terribly. But every time he felt lost, he would pull out that Bible, the one that Trump had signed for him, and he would remember that faith, even when tested, had the power to heal and guide. Daniel grew up to be a leader in his community. He became a voice for those who struggled with loss and faith, helping others navigate the difficult terrain of grief and finding strength in belief. And Trump, for his part, would often reflect on that day. The boy who asked about God, who showed him that faith still mattered, even in a world that seemed to have forgotten about it. Years later, when Daniel was an adult, he found himself standing on a stage similar to the one where he had first asked Trump that question. This time, however, it was his own town hall event. He had risen to a position of influence, helping to shape policies on education, mental health, and community welfare. As he spoke about leadership and faith, he couldn't help but think back to that moment with Trump. How a single question had shaped the course of his life, how it had sparked a fire in him that he couldn't ignore. He wasn't the little boy who had asked that question anymore, but in many ways, he was still searching, still asking, still believing. And as he looked out at the crowd, he realized that sometimes all it takes is a single moment, a single question, to change everything. Months passed, and Daniel's life began to take shape in a new, unexpected direction. After that powerful encounter with Trump, it felt as though the weight of unanswered questions had lifted from his heart. Every time he doubted his place in the world, he found comfort in the words Trump had said, and the small Bible his mother had given him. Though he was young, Daniel had started to embrace the lessons of faith that had once seemed out of reach. He attended church regularly with his mother, and over time found a community of people who shared his belief in God's power. But something deeper lingered. Daniel realized that while he had gained clarity on faith, there was still something missing. Something beyond belief. Something that tied his faith together with his purpose. He was only 10 when he made his first appearance on a local news program, speaking about his belief in God and how that day with Trump had changed him. He spoke with the kind of wisdom that belied his age. The interview was well received, and he was soon invited to speak at local schools and churches. People from all walks of life reached out to him for advice on faith, loss, and how they too could hold on to belief in times of hardship. But the more Daniel spoke, the more he realized that he wasn't just helping others, he was growing himself, becoming someone who lived out the very principles he'd learned that day. By the time Daniel entered high school, his reputation had spread beyond his town. He had become an unofficial youth leader, often called upon to lead discussions about faith and resilience. His story, and the story of his encounter with Trump, became the stuff of local legend. People marveled at the young boy who had faced tragedy and yet continued to stand firm in his belief. But there was an internal tug in Daniel that never stopped, the desire to be more than a figurehead of faith. He wanted to make real change, to go beyond speaking about the importance of belief and actually help people find their way to it. It was during his sophomore year that Daniel made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He announced to his family that he wanted to pursue politics, not just as a means of making a living, but to build a platform that could speak directly to people's hearts. "I want to be someone who leads with love," Daniel said to his mother one evening. They were sitting at the kitchen table eating the simple dinner Sarah had prepared. "Someone who brings people together, who helps them see beyond the pain, beyond the anger. I think that's what God wants me to do." Sarah, though supportive, was cautious. She knew how tough the world of politics could be. "It's not going to be easy, Daniel. Politics, it can change people. Sometimes it's hard to stay true to yourself." But Daniel was resolute. "I can do it, Mom. I know I can." Sarah nodded slowly, trusting her son's determination. Deep down, she believed that he was capable of greater things. His journey was just beginning. Daniel's political ambitions weren't born overnight, nor were they pursued without opposition. High school proved to be a battleground of conflicting ideologies. Many students doubted his ability to rise above the political chaos they saw every day. Yet Daniel remained focused on his mission, to combine his faith with the work he would do. He understood that leadership wasn't just about politics. It was about bringing people together under a shared vision, rooted in something greater than oneself. At the age of 16, Daniel received an unexpected call from none other than Donald Trump. "Daniel," Trump said, his voice carrying a familiar weight of authority, "I've been following your journey. I've heard the things you've been saying, the way you've been inspiring people, and I'm impressed. You've got a fire inside of you, a drive that's rare." Daniel could hardly believe it. The same man who had answered his question years ago, who had taken time out of his schedule to give him comfort, was now reaching out to him. "Mr. Trump, I don't know what to say," Daniel stammered, his heart pounding. "I never imagined something like this." "You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right path," Trump replied. "I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Politics can be a tough road, but if you keep your faith strong, you'll be a force for good. And if you ever need advice, I'm here." For Daniel, it was more than a conversation. It was validation. Here was a man who had once been the most powerful in the country, someone who had been through the fires of leadership, and now he was offering mentorship. Daniel's rise in local politics came swiftly after that conversation. His drive, combined with the clarity of his purpose, allowed him to excel. He ran for student body president of his high school and won in a landslide, with his platform focused on unity, faith, and resilience. He worked with various community organizations, helping to revitalize local outreach programs and working to create a space where people of all faiths could come together for shared causes. Throughout all of it, Daniel never wavered from the core lessons he had learned. When facing opposition, he didn't just argue, he listened. When he faced ridicule or doubts, he found solace in prayer. His faith became his shield, but it was his compassion, his desire to lead with love, that made him a powerful figure. By the time Daniel reached college, he was no longer just a local leader. He had made a name for himself in political circles, speaking at conferences, organizing faith-based charity events, and speaking to groups of young people who saw him as a role model. One fateful evening, while he was attending a fundraiser for a political cause in Washington, he saw Trump again. This time, it wasn't a town hall, and it wasn't a young boy with a simple question. This time, Daniel was the one giving a speech, at a podium, standing tall before hundreds of people. As he finished his speech, he stepped down, his heart racing, and there, near the exit, was Trump waiting for him. With a firm handshake, Trump smiled. "You've done good, Daniel. You've come a long way." Daniel smiled back, humbled by the recognition. "It's all because of what you told me when I was a kid." Trump's eyes softened, and for a moment, he seemed like a different person than the one who had spent years in the political spotlight. "I knew you had it in you, but you, Daniel, you're going to do great things. Keep your faith always." Years later, after Daniel had risen to a prominent position in the national political landscape, he sat in his office surrounded by advisors, media, and leaders from all over the country. His journey had been long and often filled with doubts, but each challenge had taught him more about himself, about leadership, and about God. On one particularly reflective morning, as he looked out over the city from his office window, he thought back to the day he had asked Trump about faith. "Mr. Trump," Daniel said softly to himself, as if the former president were still sitting beside him. "You were right. Faith is the key. It's what keeps me grounded." Daniel had come full circle. From the young boy seeking answers to the leader guiding others, he realized that the power of faith, of holding on to something greater than oneself, had been the foundation of his entire journey. He had learned that in times of doubt, faith was the beacon that could lead anyone through. And it was something he could share with the world, just as Trump had shared it with him. As the sun set behind the city skyline, Daniel closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and knew in his heart that his mission was far from over. As the years passed, Daniel's reputation continued to grow. He had become a prominent figure in the political world, but it was his unwavering faith and the lessons he had learned that truly defined his leadership. His journey had begun with a single question from a young boy searching for answers, and that question had carried him through the darkest moments of his life, transforming him into the leader he had always dreamed of becoming. Through his work, Daniel touched the lives of countless individuals, from people struggling with loss to those seeking purpose in a world that often seemed uncertain. He had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of hardship, faith could provide the strength to overcome any obstacle. His speeches, his actions, and his unwavering commitment to helping others had earned him a place in the hearts of many. One quiet evening, as Daniel sat in his office reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he received an unexpected call. It was from his mother. "Daniel," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I was just looking through some old photos and I found something. It's a letter you wrote when you were little, right after that town hall meeting with Trump. You'd forgotten about it, but you wrote about how you wanted to make a difference, how you wanted to help others understand faith, just like you had." Daniel smiled as he listened, the memories flooding back. He remembered the young boy full of questions, full of hope, and a longing for answers that seemed so distant back then. "Do you remember what you wrote?" Sarah asked softly. Daniel paused, the weight of his mother's words sinking in. "I do. I remember writing that I wanted to be a leader, someone who would show people that faith could bring us together." "Seems like you've done just that," Sarah said, her voice full of pride. And in that moment, Daniel realized just how far he had come. His path had been shaped by a question, but it had led him to a deeper understanding of himself, of faith, and of the power of leadership grounded in love and belief. He had met Trump again many times over the years, but it was that first meeting, that exchange in Missouri, that had set him on the path he walked today. The impact of a single question had rippled through his life, creating a legacy of faith that would continue to inspire others for generations to come. As Daniel looked out over the horizon, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had come full circle. He had asked the question that had shaped his life, and in return, he had given the world the answers he had found along the way. And in that moment, he knew that the journey was far from over. The road ahead was still long, but he would walk it with faith, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was never truly alone.